Mr. Speaker, my question is for the Acting Minister of Fisheries and Aquaculture. Mr. Speaker, recently there has been a lot of controversy over proposed amendments to the new Federal Fisheries Act, Bill C-45. In late February, our Provincial Minister of Fisheries issued a press release calling for the approval of this act. Many people in the fishing industry and coastal communities don't understand what some of these changes mean, and I believe more discussion is needed. My question: why is the minister calling for this act to be passed when further talks are needed with all the stakeholders of Nova Scotia's coastal communities?
The Honourable Acting Minister of Fisheries and Aquaculture.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Bill C-45 on the floor of the House of Commons right now apparently is being hoisted, I believe, by the Liberals, being held up in the proceedings of that House. Mr. Speaker, I can say that today that we do need changes to the Federal Fisheries Act. Mr. Speaker, the Federal Fisheries Act is 136 years old. The Minister of Fisheries federally has the sole responsibility for the fisheries in Canada. And Mr. Speaker, this new bill, from what I can understand, will provide a lot more understandable pieces, a lot more regulations, ones that will benefit all Nova Scotians and that, therefore, all Canadians.
The Honourable Member for Digby-Annapolis on your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, changes may be needed to the Act, and a lot of people in coastal communities are in support of taking a further look at this bill. There is growing concern among the people of Nova Scotia over these amendments. Mr. Speaker, in the minister's press release on February the 28th, 2007, he stated, "There are concerns, but most are based on lack of detail about what this new act will do." Mr. Speaker, it is up to the provincial minister and his government to clear up this lack of detail, and I'm not sure if the minister is clear on all this, so I'll ask, is our provincial minister fully aware of all the proposed amendments to the new Federal Fisheries Act, Bill C-45?
The Honourable Acting Minister of Fisheries and Aquaculture.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I can assure you that the Minister is fully aware of all those amendments. Mr. Speaker, I can also say that the Department has worked long and hard to make sure that some of these changes will come forward, making sure that through federal-provincial relations, through those in Ministers' meetings, I know the previous Minister of Fisheries worked his darnest to make sure that some of those changes were brought forward in the Federal Fisheries Act, and I can assure the member opposite that we're making sure we protect all fisher people in this province and make sure we have a vibrant fishery in Nova Scotia.
The Honourable Member for Digby-Annapolis on your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, the Federal Minister of Fisheries and Oceans has stated that hundreds of groups have had the opportunity to express their views and concerns about this bill. I have talked to many people in the industry who are not sure of what these changes mean. The provincial government needs to consult with their federal cousins and get these answered. Mr. Speaker, many believe thousands of people will be affected if these changes go through. So after 139 years with no change in this act, what is the great rush? My question to the Premier: will your government help in providing all the details on Bill C-45 to concerned stakeholders in our coastal communities of Nova Scotia?
The Honourable the Premier.
Refer that to the Acting Minister, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Acting Minister of Fisheries and Aquaculture.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I can assure you that many federal governments over the last 139 years have consulted with Canadians, and I'm sure they have files and files and files of things that should be changed within that act. But I can assure you that the Department of Fisheries will continue to work with its federal colleagues to make sure that this is the best possible deal for Nova Scotia.
The Honourable Member for Shelburne.
Hear, 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 hear. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I noted the Acting Minister was off by 3 years. I hope we don't take 3 years to correct this one. The Fishery Act is 139 years old. Mr. Speaker, my question is to the Acting Minister of Fisheries and Agriculture. Bill C-45, the new Fishery Act, was introduced on December 13, 2006, and was supported by this minister in a press release dated December 22nd and again on February the 28th. However, stakeholders like fishermen have been calling me since December the 14th to raise concerns with this bill, asking me to do all I can to have this bill C-45 delayed so that the needed amendments can be made. My question through you, Mr. Speaker, is why won't this acting minister listen to stakeholders and help get the needed amendments made?
The Honourable Acting Minister of Fisheries and Aquaculture.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I can say I'm really enjoying this discussion because, Mr. Speaker, I can say the member opposite, I've seen a number of pieces of information coming from his office that, in my estimation, are misleading fishermen on the auspices of what this act is bringing forward. We'll continue to work with the federal government to make sure that that information is available to all fisher people to understand the importance of Bill C-45.
The Honourable Member for Shelburne on your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, I'm looking forward to the debate in the next few weeks here, and I'd like to put the information forward. Mr. Speaker, the current act, which is 139 years old, it is important that we as elected officials take the time to get it right. On February the 23rd, I was at an Eastern Fishermen's Federation meeting where DFO officials raised concern saying that some of the wording in this bill does not give comfort. We have DFO staff uneasy with the language, and I know from being on the wharves that fishermen have concerns. My question is, when will the acting minister take the step back, stand up for the best interests of our coastal communities, and demand amendments from his counterpart in Ottawa?
The Honourable Acting Minister of Fisheries and Aquaculture.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I can assure, again, all members of this House that, of course, this is a federal issue. This is one that we will continue to communicate with our federal colleagues, that I'm sure that staff at the Department of Fisheries and Oceans will have their information to it. But, Mr. Speaker, I can say that the member opposite, of course, when he's not too sure who to shoot at, he shoots at bureaucrats. When he's not too sure who to shoot at, he's shooting at politicians. So, Mr. Speaker, I wonder if he would be interested in running for federal politics and maybe get this done. Thank you very much.
The Honourable Member for Shelburne on your final supplementary.
Challenge, Mr. Speaker, but the biggest complaint that I'm hearing on the wharves is that Bill C-45 was created without any consultations from our coastal communities. And I like to table, and from West Coast Canada, I would like to table some documents. And I also would like to make notice that the fishermen have different concerns, and a petition is being circulated as we speak on the east coast of Canada and our west coast friends. We don't want to see this bill die, but we want to make sure that all voices have a chance to be heard. My question is, how will this acting minister help our coastal communities ensure that they have their voices heard regarding this new Fisheries Act?
The Honourable Acting Minister of Fisheries and Aquaculture.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Again, I can say that we'll continue to work with our federal colleagues, and I can say that over the last 100 or so years that the Department of Fisheries has been consulting with fisher people all across Canada, and I'm sure that it's time to get something done to make sure that we have the correct piece of legislation so we can continue the work of protecting our fisheries and our coastal communities in all of Nova Scotia and all of Canada.
The Honourable Member for Kings West.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Speaker, my question is for the Minister responsible for Public Service Commission. There are almost 400 casual employees from across the province who work part of every year with the Department of Natural Resources. These employees perform crucial work for the Department and the citizens of Nova Scotia, serving as fire crew, park personnel, and conservation officers. Some of these employees have faithfully served the people of Nova Scotia for over 20 years. But here's the rub. Despite their faithful service, the difficult and sometimes dangerous work we expect from these employees, according to the antiquated provisions of the Civil Service Act, they are not considered employees and therefore are not eligible for the same rates of pay or benefits as other employees of the province. My question to the Minister, will this government review the definition of employee to ensure that those casual workers who have faithfully served this province in and year out are given the same respect and benefits as other provincial employees?
The Honourable Minister of Human Resources.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I'd like to start by saying again that, yes, we definitely value the service that our seasonal workers provide to this province, both in DNR and within tourism, heritage and culture. These are very important people who play a definite role in our province. And we have committed to doing this review, I stated earlier, and we'll continue that review. I hope to have those results within the next few months, and then I will sit down again with the respective parties.
The Honourable Member for Kings West on your first supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I would like to thank them that are here in the gallery today for the jobs they perform each year on behalf of this province. Most of these Department of Natural Resource casual positions are located in rural Nova Scotia, and rural Nova Scotia contains all of this province's natural resources. The latest census information tells us that rural Nova Scotia is losing its population, and with it, those workers who preserve and protect our land. It is therefore vital that we do what we can to encourage these employees to stay in rural Nova Scotia and continue their work. My question to the Minister, will this government show a commitment to rural Nova Scotia by reviewing the situation of casual employees with the Department of Natural Resources?
The Honourable Minister of Human Resources.
Mr. Speaker, I believe that I've already stated that, yes, we are currently doing a review. Those results will be available in the next few months, and at that time, again, I will sit down with those parties.
The Honourable Member for Kings West on your final supplementary.
Well, Mr. Speaker, we'll just shorten it up here. Maybe we can get to the crux of this. Some of these employees have dedicated their entire working lives to this province, and yet they are being punished for something they have no control over. The nature of this difficult work, which they willingly decide to perform, is seasonal. So my question to the Minister is, will the government commit to make the changes necessary to provide the same benefits to these casual employees who have faithfully served this province year in and year out and are afforded the same as other employees of the province?
The Honourable Minister of Human Resources.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And again, the review is ongoing. When we have those results back, we will evaluate them and take a step forward at that point in time. Our position has been clear for seasonal and workers in the past, and under our legislation, any seasonal employee who works more than 6 months is eligible to become a member. So, thank you.
The Honourable Member for Cape Breton Nova.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my question is for the Minister of Community Services through you. Earlier this month, it came to light that asbestos was posing yet another problem in Cape Breton housing. Workers had to suspend renovations on some units where vermiculite was found on the furnace. The problem was loosened adhesive tape, which will have to be repaired. My question through you, Mr. Speaker, to the Minister, pay now or pay later. Why won't this government put in a plan to get the asbestos out of these housing units once and for all?
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I thank my honourable colleague for raising this very important issue. Mr. Speaker, as all members of this House remember, I rose in my place earlier or later last year to address the issue of the asbestos in the housing units in Cape Breton. We had engaged the internationally acclaimed company of Pinch & LeBlanc to conduct studies for us. Mr. Speaker, we proceeded in a very mature, responsible manner in addressing our asbestos management plan. We will continue to do that, Mr. Speaker, to ensure the safety and security of all Nova Scotians, and in particular the residents that my honourable colleague is referencing.
The Honourable Member for Cape Breton Nova on your first supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, a surveillance and inspection program is little comfort to the residents living in these units now or to the residents who may live in these units in the future. The fact of the matter remains that you can tape and seal and tinker all you want, but sooner or later the asbestos has to come out. Anything less is a waste of money. My question to the Minister of Community Services, why not invest in phasing in the removal of asbestos now instead of sealing it and taking it out later?
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And again, I know my honourable colleague has the best interest of his constituents at heart, as do all members in this House, Mr. Speaker. But the experts will offer information, Mr. Speaker. The experts will offer validation that there is a proper manner in which we manage asbestos. If we do so in that proper manner, Mr. Speaker, it is absolutely safe. And, Mr. Speaker, we abide by the experts in this area, the health experts and the environmental experts, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Cape Breton Nova on your final supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, loose duct tape was the culprit this time. It could be a crack in the chimney. It could be a damaged roof in the storm, damage to walls. But how long this asbestos has been in this unit? For over 30 years. There will always be a risk of exposure. So my question to the minister: when will her government do the responsible thing and get the asbestos out of public housing?
The Honourable Minister of Community Services.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And as I indicated last time, Mr. Speaker, we will respect the opinion and the findings of the experts, the health experts, the environmental experts. Certainly, the Housing Authority is already in the process of replacing the existing adhesive foil tape with a more superior mesh and fiberglass sealant system, Mr. Speaker. And again, that's under the advice of the experts, and we'll continue to follow their advice, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Halifax Needham.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, my question through you is for the Minister of Education. Mr. Speaker, on the 18th of January this year, Maple Leaf Chicken Processing Plant in Kennard announced its imminent closure. Its 380 employees will lose their jobs on the 30th of April this year. Mr. Speaker, following this shock announcement, the Minister's Department established a transition office in association with the Maple Leaf Management and the United Food and Commercial Workers Union. So my question for the Minister is, how much money has her department committed to the successful transition of the Maple Leaf workers?
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Mr. Speaker, thank you to the member opposite for the question, and we as the Department of Education were very pleased to work with other departments to provide a service to the workers who were disadvantaged because of that closure. And I think at the time I did indicate that we had taken 3 permanent full-time staff to work in that office, so it was no additional cost.
The honourable member for Halifax Needham on your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, I'm not sure if the Minister understood my question, so we'll have another go at it. Mr. Speaker, we're currently witnessing a staggering level of out-migration in our region. Last year, over 13,000 people left the Maritimes for Western Canada. A recent study by the Workplace Partners panel shows that 96% of managers in Atlantic Canada feel skill shortages are a big problem. And here we have a situation where almost 400 people in the Valley region are available for retraining and upskilling, which falls within the minister's jurisdiction. So, Mr. Speaker, my question to the minister is, how many of the Maple Leaf workers have been successfully transitioned to new opportunities since January, perhaps here in Atlantic Canada?
The Honourable Minister of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I do believe that's a different question. I know that our staff had worked with local employers and agencies within the area and had identified 228 possible job opportunities. As to how many of those workers were able to take advantage of those opportunities is a number I can provide at another time.
The honourable member for Halifax Needham on your final supplementary.
I would very much appreciate receiving that information so that we can ensure that the workers are well attended to. It's our primary concern, of course. Mr. Speaker, my final question is for the Minister of Environment and Labour. Mr. Speaker, the Minister is no doubt extremely concerned about the workers at Maple Leaf Kennard because the plant, of course, is in his riding. The workers have expressed concern to my party about delays in the training and transition plan and a lack of opportunity to reskill for a new career. So, Mr. Speaker, I'm wondering if the minister can tell us how he is ensuring that these workers won't be forced to go out west, along with thousands of other Maritimers this year?
The Honourable Minister of Environment and Labour.
Thank you very much for the question. My office has been working, my MLA office has been working very extensively with Stu Gorley and with the Department of Education, and also dealing with employers who contacted my MLA office to offer jobs. We've also been in touch with the union, and we've talked with the union members, and we're working hard. Under my hat as Labour Minister, I've also been in touch with the McCain brothers and made sure that they understand that all the obligations under labour agreements they are to fulfill, and if they could go beyond that, we'd appreciate that, and that message I conveyed to them personally.
The Honourable Member for Kings West.
Mr. Speaker, my question is for the Minister responsible for gaming. Mr. Speaker, recent reports have shown that between 2001 and 2006, 44 retailers, 25 employees have won prizes in excess of $25,000. According to the Atlantic Lottery Corporation, retailers have won 10 times more than what is statistically probable. The total amount won by either the employees or the retailers totals $7.5 million. While I have complete confidence in our retailers and their employees, but Nova Scotians have a right to be suspicious of the recent findings and the ALC's attempt to sweep this under the rug as if nothing is wrong. My question: will you join my call and ask the ALC to conduct an independent review in light of the recent findings?
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Thank you very much. With a question to myself or the Premier? No, just you. I thought you would. Yes. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank the member for the question. We obviously received that information as well. We are confident that the Atlantic Lottery Corporation is taking the appropriate measures to ensure the security of gaming in Nova Scotia.
The Honourable Member for Kings West on your first supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, we'll try to Premier this time. Well, Premier, the government's track record at attacking issues in the gaming sector has been dismal. Once again, we see lack of leadership coming from our Premier. The Premier of New Brunswick has voiced his concern, and he too has called for an independent review. Nova Scotians spent over $200 million last year in ticket lottery purchases, and they deserve to know the full extent of any wrongdoing or insufficient protections and controls ALC currently has. My question: Premier, have you had any discussions with the ALC or other premiers in Atlantic Canada regarding the retailer winnings?
The Honourable the Premier.
I refer that to the Minister responsible.
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Again, to the honourable member, Mr. Speaker, we are very, very concerned, obviously, about the integrity of gaming in Nova Scotia. But also, we have great trust in the many small retailers across this province in their honesty and integrity. And we believe that the Atlantic Lottery Corporation was created for a reason, and the reason was, of course, to manage the delivery on behalf of the 4 Atlantic provinces of that particular gaming. And, Mr. Speaker, we have no reason to believe that they won't do a very good job in managing that on behalf of Nova Scotians.
The Honourable Member for Kings West on your final supplementary.
Premier, Nova Scotians want transparency, they want an open government, they want fairness. Premier, we can't wait for the 5th estate to come to do a report in Nova Scotia. Clearly something has happened when retailers have won 10 times more than what is statistically probable. Your silence to date on this issue is alarming. People of this province deserve fair forms of lottery, and they deserve an equal opportunity at winning. The time to act is now so that we can assure the people have confidence in ticket lottery in Nova Scotia. My question: Premier, will you do the prudent thing, join my call for an independent review, call for the ALC's attendance at a public accounts meeting?
The Honourable the Premier.
I refer that to the Minister responsible.
The Honourable Minister of Finance.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we are advised through the Atlantic Lottery Corporation that they have made 20 upgrades to the system around security, audits, public education, and the like. We believe that they understand the seriousness of this issue, and they're taking appropriate steps to protect Nova Scotians' gaming.
The Honourable Member for Queens.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is for the Acting Minister of Fisheries and Aquaculture. The Friends of Port Mattoon Bay have organized a citizens group in opposition to Aquafish Farm's proposed expansion and have gained the support of their municipal council, myself, as well as their Member of Parliament. Last fall, I tabled a petition on their behalf with thousands of names in opposition. These people are speaking out, but their message does not seem to be heard by this government. They have serious concerns about the environmental and economic impacts to tourism, immigration, and land development of this proposed expansion. These economic concerns should be addressed with a thorough economic impact study, which is in the minister's power to see happen. My question is, will the minister commit to having an economic impact study done in order to address these concerns?
The Honourable Acting Minister of Fisheries and Aquaculture.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, there is a very rigorous process involved in approving any aquaculture site and or expansion. I know that this is in full process at this point in time, and I know the minister is looking forward to that information to come forward. I know there is ample opportunity for all those interested in this project to come forward and make their thoughts known.
The Honourable Member for Queens on your first supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, there has been much local outcry against this development, and this past weekend there was yet another rally in Port Mattoon with at least 200 people gathered to protest the proposed location of this fish farm. Communities should be consulted and partnered with, but the government seems determined to go ahead. I would like to ask the minister, why is this department ignoring the commercial fishers, scientists, residents, other business people, local government, and other widespread supporters who are speaking out against this expansion?
The Honourable Acting Minister of Fisheries and Aquaculture.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, aquaculturists in this province are environmentalists. They are stewards of our water. They produce a product that is second to none. And Mr. Speaker, they have every right to propose any project that will look for the benefit, of course, of Nova Scotians. Any expansion of aquaculture is good so far as that it provides employment, it provides extra products for our fish plants, and Mr. Speaker, there is, as I said, a very rigorous process in order to get one approved, and I know there's ample opportunity for all those people involved to make their thoughts known.
The Honourable Member for Queens on your final supplementary.
Mr. Speaker, my final question is for the Minister of Economic Development. Jobs and economic development are most needed in Nova Scotia. However, this proposed expansion will only see 4 to 5 jobs at best. The bulk of profits from this expansion will be leaving our communities, and there is potential of other jobs lost and economic hardship for local fishermen should this expansion move forward. Will this minister support the people of Port Mattoon and discuss with the Minister of Fisheries and Aquaculture the importance of carrying out an economic impact study before this process goes any further?
The Honourable Minister of Economic Development.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and through you to the member opposite, I will assure that member and all members that I will let the lead minister, the Minister of Fisheries, onto the file, and I will have a dialogue with him, but I'll wait for the outcome of the report.
The Honourable Member for Queens.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is for the Minister of Health. Valerie Hurdle is a senior with a history of mental illness. She was admitted to the QE2 in 2005 following a suicide attempt and was transferred to the Abbey Lane Memorial Building, where she receives electroconvulsive therapy every 2 weeks. Ms. Hurdle's family has built an apartment for her in their home so that she can live with them. They are in Sydney, though, where ECT is not available to new patients. My question is, what is your department doing to ensure that people in Cape Breton have access to the same services as those in Metro?
The Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. As you know, that mental health, of course, being offered through our district health authorities. I know that the district health authority, of course, in Cape Breton, is responsible to bring these projects forward to us. I'm not aware of any proposal to offer this service in Cape Breton. Mr. Speaker, I can also say that it is very responsible for government to ensure patient safety and making sure that we have the correct amenities available, which is why I can feel quite confident that the service that is being offered here in Metro is a very good one.
Order, please. The time allotted for question period has expired. Orders. Government business. The Honourable Deputy Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to call the public bills for second reading.
Public bills for second reading.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to call Bill number 137, Livestock Health Services Act.
Bill which number? Order, please. The Chair's 137. Bill 137. The Honourable Acting Minister of Fisheries and Aquaculture.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and very pleased to stand today and talk about the proposed amendments to the Livestock Health Services Act that the Department of Agriculture is bringing forward. As you know, the Department's Livestock Health Services Program provides a key service to farmers in rural areas of Nova Scotia who are unable to transport their large animals to veterinarian clinics. It's a lot easier for the vet to go to the animal than to transport to the clinic. It is also important that a fee structure is established so that the large animal vets can continue to provide this very essential service to farmers all across Nova Scotia. Mr. Speaker, the Department of Agriculture pays these veterinarians for their travel time and for the distance to the farms. This ensures that farmers do not pay more for veterinarian services just because they live further away. It creates a stable or a level playing field for all farmers across Nova Scotia. Currently, the Livestock Health Services Act authorizes Governor and Council to make these regulations establishing the rates for compensation for veterinarians. The proposed amendment will give the Minister of Agriculture the authority to make any changes to the compensation rates. The Minister will set those rates within the approved budget parameters for this program within the Department's budget. Veterinarians provide an essential service for our agriculture industry, and we want to compensate them fairly. It is also important that we maintain a positive working relationship and a fee level to ensure that this service is available. And I know that there's a number of members that have brought this issue forward of the availability, of course, of large vet. Of course, the trend in veterinary medicine, of course, has been more towards the smaller animals, the pet dogs and pet cats and those kinds of things because of the less travel time, less muss and fuss, apparently. But we want to make sure that those individuals who do choose to be large animal vets are able to care for those animals in a timely fashion, and which is why we want to be reactive enough to make changes to that compensation rate on a more reactive basis. So, Mr. Speaker, I want to thank again the members opposite for their I'll thank them for their input in this one, and I look forward to seeing this bill move forward through second reading.
Thank you. The honourable member for Hants East.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm pleased to stand and speak to this piece of legislation for a few minutes, and also not just because of being a legislator in this House, but because I make use of large animal veterinarians, and not meaning to speak in a negative way to them. I like not to make use of them any more than I have to, but I certainly want to impress upon the House the value of veterinarians for the large animal sector. The minister, maybe when he reads Hansard, he'll see that he said large veterinarians, and I'm not sure that they all are. Some are smaller. Members of the House probably wouldn't know this, but I was accepted to Atlantic Veterinary College in 1994, and I didn't go for couple of reasons, and I'm, you know, I won't say I gave that up for a career in politics. That was a little further down the road. I guess the year I would have been graduating, 1998, was the year I got elected, and I've certainly thought and rethought about the path that I've taken, or not, and I want to say that probably not going was probably a better thing, only in the sense that when I would have graduated, I would have been 42 years old, trying to either buy into a practice or create my own. And I would have very soon been to an age where a lot of veterinarians would be thinking of leaving the industry, and I would really just be getting myself established. The changes that the minister has indicated in this act, I mean, certainly one is purely housekeeping. I mean, we're identifying that the Livestock Health Services Act is amended by taking out and fisheries. You know, it's not agriculture and fisheries anymore, and I think it probably makes some sense as well. I think for purely administrative reasons that the minister could make decisions rather than going to governor and council or going to cabinet, you know, with those requests. And I would say that, you know, and we'd assume that that'd be in cases. It makes sense for the minister to do that if the minister makes sense, and so we certainly will give the minister that prerogative that the decisions that he makes are the sensible ones, and he doesn't have to go to cabinet to do those. It says the minister may make regulations prescribing the minimum and maximum fees that may be charged to livestock owners by any veterinarian in receipt of assistance under this program. So the point I want to make, and I'd like to make it as clearly as I can, of what a valuable service is rendered under this act, Mr. Speaker. I'm not sure. I think the minister touched on it, and I didn't think maybe as clearly as I hope I will. But the notion that because of the makeup of rural Nova Scotia, you know, anybody setting up a business, and in particular veterinarians, they would, if they have a large animal practice, and some have mixed large animal and small animal, and certainly in my area where we have kind of a growing suburban area as well as a very large rural area, certainly there are practices that mix the two, and there is certainly one that is purely small animal, or we would say pets, but if you were to consider, I think the veterinarians in my area, which would be Shubenacadie, the ones I would usually deal with, their office is very close to where the Shubenacadie Wildlife Park is, and so their calls would take them, you know, to the member for the beautiful Colchester-Musquodoboit Valley. Actually, it's in his constituency where the office is located, and but they would also come into my area as well, and they would go, you know, as far as Knoll or Walton, perhaps. That area may take use a veterinarian from Windsor area, but we're talking, you know, if in the Shubenacadie area we have a large number of dairy farms who make a lot of use of veterinarians, but they're a stone's throw, Mr. Speaker, from the veterinarian office. Yet those, I think of the Point Road actually in Knoll Shore, or East Knoll, that there's a dairy farm there, and when the vets go there, I'm thinking they'd be going, well, 35 kilometers anyway, and it actually may be farther. So what this legislation does, Mr. Speaker, is it kind of levels that playing field so that someone in East Knoll can actually pay, what they pay for the veterinarian is very much similar to what the person in Shubenacadie would be paying. And the reason for this, I think is a sensible reason, is that this enhances their ability to ensure that the health of their animals is safeguarded, that they make use of a veterinarian as much as they need to, or they think they need to, and they're not discouraged from doing that because of an exorbitant cost of getting the veterinarian there. And I think maybe the minister, when he closes debate, will indicate, but I think this is on the travel, if I'm not mistaken. This is not the call fee per se, but it's the travel component of the call, so that in essence, anybody using a large animal veterinarian is basically, we would say, because of the fee structure, the same distance from the veterinarian clinic, which has a significant advantage for people in large animal practice, and for farmers. I'm not sure if members heard the other morning, and I'm trying to think which morning it was, because I don't think it was yesterday. But anyway, the Current had a program on veterinarian practices. They talked to some veterinarians in New Brunswick, actually, and I think the New Brunswick government actually hires large animal vets as, I guess they'd be public servants or civil servants, and the difficulty, as you can well imagine, if you were to think about trying to get just doctors for humans into clinics and in rural Nova Scotia, the difficulty of that, well, it's very similar as well. I remember, as I said earlier, that I was accepted to the Atlantic Veterinary College in 1994. Well, I had thought about veterinary medicine when I was 18, getting out of high school, and I spent a week or so traveling with the local veterinarians. And then that would have been about 1974, I think, in that area. And what they were saying then was that large animal practice at that time took up 80% of their time and gave them 20% of their income. And the small animal practice obviously was the opposite, 20% of their time, 80% of their income. And I don't think that really has ever changed significantly. The small animal practices seem to be fairly more lucrative than large animal practices. And I want to say, as much as if you keep livestock and as much as you learn to do a lot of things for yourself, I deliver a fair number, well, I shouldn't say fair number, I deliver lambs every year that the labor is a difficult one. And this is the first year for 3 or 4 that I haven't had to call a veterinarian. I'm not out of the woods yet. I still have a couple of deliveries that have to occur. But so far it's been fairly problem-free, and I try to learn from my veterinarian when they come, so that I don't have to call them. And I got to say, I'm really impressed with what these people can do. And of course, we can all say, well, certainly they're trained, but I can think of a couple of cases where lambs on the way that I could not deliver, and one veterinarian, actually a woman, came and I don't know, if I had to turn and taken my coat off, it would have been about all the time it would have taken for her to have that situation rectified. And I was just amazed at something I had spent 25 minutes at and gotten nowhere. So certainly, at 2 in the morning at 20 below, you certainly can appreciate the service that these people will deliver. And I want to say to the minister, I'm not receiving any calls on this legislation, and so I'm going to pick the brain of my local veterinarians to find out where they are with this, and I'm hoping that this is addressing some concerns that they've raised, perhaps. But I want to express to the minister that the necessity for a program that does help with those costs for large animal vets and kind of levels the playing field for producers, at various distances from the clinic. And I look forward to seeing this legislation go through the House, Mr. Speaker, and I'm interested to hear if the minister is going to respond to one of my comments, but to certainly hear what other members have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. The honourable member for Annapolis.
Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to rise and speak for a few minutes, as the honourable colleague had suggested, on Bill 137, and I'll hold true to my word and speak for a few minutes. I want to add, though, at the beginning, and say that I've never used the services of a large animal veterinarian, nor have I ever aspired to go to vet school. and nor do I think there's any deliveries on the horizon. So we'll see what happens as we go forward. This really is a bill of housekeeping. It makes a lot of sense to me that the minister should have the authority to make changes when it comes to the fees that veterinarians get a chance to charge regarding mileage. As it was explained by my colleague just prior from Hants East, this is really dealing with the mileage that veterinarians get to charge from their office to the call or to the farm, which makes a lot of sense, particularly in rural Nova Scotia. If you look in my own constituency, there are a number of vets who deal with small animals, very, very few deal with large, and as a matter of fact, in some cases, they need to come as far away as Kings County to go down not only through my riding, but down through Digby and the French Shore. And this allows it to make an even playing field from one end of Nova Scotia to the other. What's a bit frustrating from my perspective, Mr. Speaker, being in the House for 4 years, and we've talked about agriculture at every session, and really the crisis that the agricultural community finds itself in now. And you know, the only piece of legislation that we've dealt with over the last 4 years has been some wording to the Farm Registration Act. It took the opposition side of the House to actually put teeth into the Farm Registration Act to ensure that the Federation of Agriculture received all the fees that were collected. And now we're seeing a bill which deals with really paying mileage for veterinarians. As it was spoken during question period, there's 380 people going to be laid off in Kennard. Larson's is, with 400 jobs, is in jeopardy. And what are we doing? We're remaining silent on the industry in rural Nova Scotia. We often talk in this House about out-migration. You know, we talk about the rural economy. What better way to deal with the out-migration issue in the rural economy than to invest in what have been our traditional industries? It was interesting, the government of Ontario has just invested heavily in the pork industry of Ontario, not for a phase-out, not for an exit strategy, but for a transition into a new and modern industry, one to allow that industry in Ontario to start dealing with modern markets. And what are we doing here? We're remaining silent on that issue. Pork Nova Scotia has put in front of this government a plan that would deal with allowing a transition, not an exit strategy, but a transition for us to move forward to ensure that the agricultural industry would be alive and well in Nova Scotia. And we've been silent on that, Mr. Speaker. The issue around the beef issue in Nova Scotia, I mean, it's almost to a sin, as a matter of fact, that we're sitting here talking about this particular issue. The large animals in Nova Scotia are disappearing, quite frankly, because the farmers are disappearing. I would suggest to the acting Minister of Agriculture, as we deal with this piece of legislation, that he reminds the Minister of Agriculture that it is important for the rural economy, it is important to stop out-migration, it is important for Nova Scotia's entire economy that we begin to look at the agricultural industry not in a way of tinkering with it, but of a true investment in how we can ensure that it will be there for generations to come. Mr. Speaker, I, like the previous speaker, have not heard from a lot of veterinarians. I do look forward to this bill moving into law amendments, so we have an opportunity to hear from the industry itself to make sure that they're happy with it. And I also look forward to the minister's remarks. And I know he will not only speak to this bill, but he will speak to the comments that I've made about his government's lack of initiative when it comes to the agricultural industry and its ability not to throw money at it, but its inability to provide them with a clear, concise path to the future to ensure that the next generation of young Nova Scotians will be in the agricultural industry. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. I will now recognize the Honourable Acting Minister of Agriculture to close debate on Bill 137.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I will try to keep my comments relatively short as well. Just to a couple of points, and I will start from the member from Annapolis, and do concede that the bill before us is mostly housekeeping, making sure that we can be reactive within the Department of Agriculture to the needs of all farmers across Nova Scotia. It does create a level playing field, as I said, for farmers to be able to access the large animal veterinarians. being able to charge that mileage fee. There is a mileage fee that is charged back to the department, and I know that that has grown from, I think it was $1.29 per kilometer to $1.50 per kilometer, which takes in consideration the mileage and the stuff and the gas mileage on the car, as well as the time that the vet is in that car going to the site. So there is some of these things that take consideration, and depending on the way the cost of fuel, the cost of the time for that vet, things may change, and we might need to be a little more reactive. Mr. Speaker, I can also say that we'll continue to work with all commodities and all the Federation to make sure that we have a vibrant agriculture industry in Nova Scotia. I can say on the buy local issue quickly, you know, thinking that it's all doom and gloom from the member from Annapolis as he stood up, talking about the products that we are buying from local farmers. The 150 hospitals, schools, and homes for special care have seen a growth in local purchases from 5,700 kilograms of produce to 42,000 kilograms of produce. We're not doing anything? I would say that we're working steadily to make sure that Nova Scotian farmers can get their products into our institutions and making sure that we're doing our part to help those farmers grow. Also, that 63% of this group, and this is our largest buying group, 63% of this group, their purchases are now from the Maritimes, a maritime grown product, whether it be in beef, whether it be in pork, and we'll continue to make sure that that investment continues into the future. Mr. Speaker, I will close up to some comments to the member of Hants East. I can say that we still have bursaries for people wanting to take veterinary school, and we'd be more than happy to work with the paperwork with the member from Hants East to become that vet that I know he really, really, really wanted to be. So, Mr. Speaker, I would like to close second reading on bill number 137.
Thank you. The motion before the House for second reading on bill number 137. Is the House ready for the question? Question has been called. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Those against, motion carried.
Bill 137, entitled an act to amend Chapter 8 of the Acts of 2001, the Livestock Health Services Act.
Order that this bill be referred to the Committee on Law Amendments. The Honourable the Deputy Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to call Bill number 135, Provincial Court Act.
Bill number 135 for second reading. The Honourable the Minister of Justice.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and it gives me great privilege to rise today to move second reading of the Provincial Court Act and Amendments 2. Mr. Speaker, yesterday the government introduced legislation that will improve access to family court by amalgamating the family court and the provincial court in the province of Nova Scotia. Mr. Speaker, as most members know, certain members of the bar here would know that currently in Nova Scotia the provincial court deals with criminal matters while the family court deals with family court matters, and a lot of times, Mr. Speaker, for many people it's confusing and a lot of times very difficult to deal with the system that presently is in the province. Mr. Speaker, through this amalgamation that we're suggesting through this legislation, we hope with the support of the opposition that we'll be able to see safe passage through this House. In the future, all judges that are appointed now will have the opportunity to move, Mr. Speaker, through both courts and to be able to hear family and provincial court matters. Mr. Speaker, we believe that this legislation will provide more flexibility for the court system in Nova Scotia. I believe that it's been tried in other areas and working quite well. And, Mr. Speaker, we think that that is something that will be a progressive move in this province in regards to the court system, and we're looking again for passage to the House. So those few comments, Mr. Speaker, I move second reading of Bill number 135, Provincial Court Act.
Thank you. The Honourable the Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I just note that I believe this is my first opportunity to rise as the newly minted justice critic for my caucus. It's of course something that I take a particular pleasure in. I'm following in the footsteps of Kevin DeVoe, so and I think he and I saw eye to eye on many of these things, so it will be no surprise to you, Mr. Speaker, that much of what you may have heard from Kevin in the past you'll also hear from me. But he would not have anticipated this, I don't believe, and I have a number of comments I want to make in this regard, because this is an important change, and there are things that need to be understood by the members of this House, certainly by the opposition with respect to this act. And I'm going to start by giving you a little bit of background, Mr. Speaker. you know, the family court, when the family court was set up, it was set up so that you would have essentially a specialized court where the judges of that court were dealing with a particular aspect of law in regard to the jurisdiction of family law. The judges there received specialized training with respect to their act. They were dealing with only one division of law and therefore became experts in that area of law. And the idea behind this was that they would be able to expeditiously, because they were dealing with kind of one aspect of the law, they would be able to expeditiously move through these cases. Now that was part of the theory of it. So when you amalgamate this with the criminal division or with the provincial court, as the Justice Minister pointed out, which deals with criminal jurisdictions, the question now, I assume, is are you going to invest money in the training of these judges? Are they going to be provided with the tools that they need now that they're going to be dealing with a new aspect of the law? Some of them may not have been dealing with family law for potentially many, many years, or for that matter, forever, I suppose, depending on their area of initial practice. And I suppose there's always the opportunity for some judges to opt in or opt out if they decided that they didn't want to do that area of practice. But there is one thing about the provincial court that everybody should know, which is that the provincial court is essentially the workhorse of the criminal justice system. That is where the large bulk of criminal cases go to be dealt with. And if there are delays in the criminal system today, they are at the provincial court level. In fact, I'm not sure, maybe the Minister of Justice can tell us this, or maybe he can ease my mind in this regard, but my understanding is that trying to get to a trial nowadays in a provincial court means a substantial delay between the time when the pleas are actually entered and the trials are actually heard. So I'm not sure how amalgamating the family division into the provincial court is going to lead to a quicker resolution or quicker access for people who have family court cases or family law cases and who want to get them before the court. I'm not sure how that's going to happen unless perhaps they're going to appoint more judges. That might not be a bad thing. But Mr. Speaker, the reality is that just amalgamating the courts themselves is not the answer to quicker access. Now, there is a different approach that has been taken in Metropolitan Halifax Dartmouth. Because in Metropolitan Halifax Dartmouth, there is a unified family court. And all the family court matters here go to the family division of the Supreme Court. And so here, when you have a family law matter, you're going to end up in front of a Supreme Court justice. And the advantage to this, Mr. Speaker, is that the justice of the Supreme Court can deal not only with the narrower jurisdiction with respect to family law, but they can also deal with matters associated with the Matrimonial Property Act, which the family court cannot do. So amalgamating the family court and the provincial court means that some people who have family law issues are going to end up first in the new unified family provincial court mechanism, but are still going to have to go to the Supreme Court to resolve questions associated with matrimonial property. So essentially, they're going to have not one application before the courts, they're going to have two, potentially. So it seems to me that if we were actually looking to reform the court system with respect to family law, we would have instituted the uniform family law model that is currently in place here in Halifax across the province, so that people would have been able to resolve all those issues in one place. I'm sure my colleague for the Liberal Party understands, and I'm not sure if the minister does, but the reason for those changes in jurisdiction is that the Supreme Court is a Section 86 court, and therefore historically is seized with the jurisdiction to deal with property matters, whereas the family court and the provincial court are not, and therefore cannot deal with that area's jurisdiction. So I guess the point I'm trying to make here is I have some questions about, whether or not, it's not that I disagree necessarily with the intent, it's just that I am, at this point at least, unconvinced as to whether or not this amalgamation of the provincial and family court will actually accomplish the aims that the Minister of Justice has, which is to increase access to family court, to a family law resolution, I guess is the easier way to put that. Let me say this. Access to justice is a fundamental issue in this province. And people, whether they are dealing with as victims of crime and are watching to see that those cases go through the court, or whether they are involved in family law disputes and need to have them adjudicated, the waiting times that are currently outstanding in the system are too long. And there needs to be a resolution to this. And I'm assuming that the minister understands that that means more resources. It means that there needs to be likely more judges. There needs to be more resources on the intake end in both family law and on the criminal side. And when you deny people the right to a speedy resolution of the matter, whether it's in family law or in criminal matter, you essentially deny them access to justice. So it is important that whatever steps we take, whether it is through this or through a unified family court, that we get it right. So I'm hoping that as this bill moves forward, that we'll get some more answers with respect to exactly how this is going to operate. I'm not sure that that's what the Minister of Justice was expecting from me on this first bill, but I think it's more in the way of raising questions about where this legislation is going and where access to justice in the province is going. I'd also point out that part of that whole access to justice piece has to do with the availability of people to legal services, and that means, I talked about additional resources in the courts, on the intake side, but there also needs to be additional money in legal aid services to allow people who are unable to afford the services of a lawyer to get access to those services as well, because the system really functions much more efficiently when the people who are caught up in the system have access to fair access to those resources. So with those comments in respect to this bill, Mr. Speaker, I'll take my place. Thank you.
Thank you. The Honourable, the Acting House Leader for the Liberal Party.
New title, I guess, Mr. Speaker, is it? Acting House Leader today? It's been a while since it's been a while since we've spoken, Mr. Speaker. So I understand that maybe we should get caught up on some of the changes that have taken place in the last little bit.
I apologize.
Mr. Speaker, as the justice critic for the Liberal caucus, I'm pleased to rise on Bill number 135, and certainly start by congratulating the Leader of the Official Opposition on assuming the most important and prestigious title of Justice Critic for his caucus. And as he mentioned, his predecessor, Kevin DeVoe, the former member for Cole Harbour Eastern Passage, was the longtime Justice Critic for his party. In fact, both he and I were elected at the same time, and we both had the distinction of being Justice Critics throughout the entire time that we've been here elected. In fact, I should correct that, because I did have a an earlier stint on the government side, where fortunately I didn't have to be a critic of anything at that point. So, but unfortunately, it was very short-lived, and I look forward to the return very soon into the future. And Mr. Speaker, on many of the justice. Let's just say I think I'll be taking a different path than the one suggested by the Minister of Service, Nova Scotia Municipal Relations. But I certainly enjoyed working with the former justice critic, and we saw eye to eye on many of the issues that were brought forward and shared many of the concerns with some of the proposals being brought forward by government. And I don't doubt that that probably will be the same with the new justice critic. And I may not have been in a position to say that had he chosen some other of his colleagues as justice critic, but with him I'm pretty sure that moderation is what we can expect, and an even hand based on his experience in the court. But with that I digress, Mr. Speaker. As far as Bill number 135, obviously, Mr. Speaker, there are a number of questions that relate to this bill. Many of the bills that have been brought forward by the current Minister of Justice and by the previous Minister of Justice were done so with the Minister standing up and indicating who was supporting the legislation. In many ways, it was part of the Uniform Law Code, changes that were being brought forward. Others were changes supported by the Bar Society. Just some examples of the bills that we've seen that usually had an indication of who had been consulted, who was supporting this, and the reasons why. Unfortunately, with this bill, at this point, we don't know the answer to that. Who is pushing for the changes in Bill number 135? Is it the Bar Society? Is it the judges themselves? Or is it the staff at the Department of Justice? That's what we don't know. And I think that's very important that we be made aware of exactly where these changes are coming from. As was mentioned by Leader of Official Opposition, when the family courts were established, the idea was that they were going to be a specialized court. Knowing the many changes that have taken place over the years during the various statutes that deal with family law, the idea was that you'd have a court specifically designed to deal with these matters, a court that would take into consideration some of the sensitive matters that often appear when we're talking about family court. And I think the intent certainly was a good one, and I don't think anyone disagrees. The question that we have to ask ourselves now is that, are we watering down that specialization by increasing the jurisdiction to include provincial court matters as well, which, as mentioned by the Minister, is for the most part criminal matters that are dealt with at that point. I know myself, just the changes have taken place in family law from my time in law school. And during my 8 years as a member of the bar, is staggering, the amount of changes. And to even keep up with those type of changes, if you're not dealing with this every day, is extremely difficult. I'm sure the Leader of the Official Opposition will agree when one looks at even the changes in land registration. What he used to do as a lawyer for land registration today is nothing near what's required. And in fact, if he was to return to private practice, not that I'm suggesting that he's going to do that, but right now, as would apply to me, we would not be permitted to register a piece of property because we have not taken the training or been certified to do it under the new system. Just an example. So he has 20 years of experience, and right now, with the changes, he wouldn't be able to carry out what would be considered as a routine function of a practicing lawyer here in Nova Scotia. That's just an example of the changes that have taken place, and it's essential that we be cognizant of any lawyers or any members of the bar that are about to be appointed to the bench or are currently on the bench are certainly given the support and the resources to make sure that they are brought up to speed with the many changes that have taken place in the law dealing with family matters and dealing with the provincial court matters as well. So, Mr. Speaker, I'm certainly hoping that the Minister will not rush this bill to law amendments, because I'm hoping at the law amendment stage that maybe at that stage we will be given the opportunity to hear from either the Bar Society, possibly from a representative from the courts, or even representatives from the Minister's own department to explain to us how this bill at the end will provide a better justice system in Nova Scotia, which is what we're all concerned about. As was mentioned before, the wait times that exist in our provincial court system is unacceptable. While there has been some achievements made, there's still much too long delays that exist, both in the provincial court and in the family court. And when I think of the family court, I think of the amount of time it takes for example, when you have people looking for variance orders for support here in Nova Scotia. It takes much too long. Mr. Speaker, we know that people's financial situations change, and when they change, they should be given an opportunity to be able to seek a variance. When that takes too much time, what happens is they stop paying. And who's the loser in that? It's usually the spouse and children. And so if we are going to make changes that are going to extend that amount of time in any way, then we need to be reconsidering whether this is an appropriate change. If that is going to lessen the amount of time where people can get to court, especially family court for variance orders, or whether it's for custody, whether it's for payments, then it'll be a good thing. But any extension in those delays, I think, would be going a step in the wrong direction for many Nova Scotians who just can't afford to have that support and have those issues not dealt with in an appropriate time frame. Mr. Speaker, as has been said before and has been heard many times, justice delayed is justice denied. And we want to make sure that we have a provincial court system that can hear matters in a timely fashion, not only for the accused, but more importantly, for the victims and for the community to be able to see that justice is being done in a timely fashion and that we're not hearing of these 1 year, 6 months, 2-year delays before important criminal matters are being brought to court, and that the community and Nova Scotians can see that our justice system is functioning well and is making sure that those who have violated any sort of statutes or laws here in Nova Scotia are being dealt with in a time-efficient manner. So with that, Mr. Speaker, I look forward to possibly the Minister being able to address some of the concerns that we've raised in his closing comments on second reading. But if not, I do hope that the appropriate time will be given for notice of this bill to go out to those involved, so that at the law amendment stage we'll have the opportunity to hear whether there are any concerns with the steps we are taking. At the end of the day, if the consensus is that this is a step in the right direction, I think the Minister will see support for that. But if there are concerns, let's make sure to deal with them now rather than putting a bill forward that at the end of the day may cause us with more headaches than what we have in our system right now. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. I will now recognize the Honourable Minister of Justice to close debate on Bill 135.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And just before I begin my closing comments, I do want to welcome the Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition in regards to his new Justice Critic position. I look forward to working with the Honourable members I have with the Honourable Member for Richmond in the past. And I say that I know that all members here take the issues in regards to justice in this province very seriously, and I know it means very personally to those two members as well because of their background. Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the members for bringing the issues forward they have, and I want to commit to both members that I will ensure that staff in the department will meet with both the members and discuss the issues around their concerns, talk about who is supportive of this bill. Mr. Speaker, the intent here is to make our system a little less complex, a little easier for Nova Scotians to access, to ensure that both those courts, and Mr. Speaker, the issue was raised about whether judges would be, the judges that are in the system today will have the opportunity to decide whether they wish to stay with the system as they know it or to take part in the new system. And obviously, Mr. Speaker, that will require training. New judges that will be coming in the system of this province obviously would have the opportunity as well to learn about the new process as it unfolds. Mr. Speaker, the Leader of the Official Opposition mentioned about legal aid, and I know it's something that provincial justice ministers across this country are pressing the federal government to get back to restoring the days of 50-50 cost sharing in regards to legal aid. It's something that's needed very much in this province. It's something I'm advocating for, and will continue until we see those days return, because it's something we need. And you're absolutely right. That's something that we want to see here in Nova Scotia. But, Mr. Speaker, I believe that what we're talking about here is something that's worth pursuing. I will encourage both members to gather more information. We'll provide those information to both members from the department as to what the intent here is. And that, Mr. Speaker, I assure the House that it is to make our system more accessible for Nova Scotians. And I think that after having the opportunity to review it, I think both members would agree. So, Mr. Speaker, with those few comments, I would move second reading of Bill number 135.
Thank you. The motion before the House is for second reading on Bill number 135. Is the House ready for the question? Question has been called. All those in favour of the motion, please say aye. Aye. Those against, motion carried.
Bill 135, entitled An Act to Amend Chapter 238 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Provincial Court Act.
Order that this bill be referred to the Committee on Law Amendments. The Honourable Deputy Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to call Bill number 136, Justice Administration Amendment 2007 Act.
Bill number 136 for second reading. The Honourable, the Minister of Justice.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and it's a privilege to rise again today in regards to Justice Administration Act 2007, Bill number 136. Mr. Speaker, the members would know that yesterday the government introduced legislation which deals with a number of housekeeping amendments to the existing legislation under the Justice Administration Act. Amendments to the Small Claims Court Act will help ensure that Small Claims Act and the court has jurisdiction to deal with matters arising in every county in the province of Nova Scotia. I know, Mr. Speaker, there are members here today who are concerned about that very issue. We're also introducing amendments to the Health Authorities Act to support community health boards to address retention issues. Mr. Speaker, the amendments will allow board members to serve more than 2 consecutive terms. This will be consistent with boards of directors for district health authorities who aren't limited in the number of terms they can presently serve in the province of Nova Scotia. Mr. Speaker, we're also introducing amendments to the Act governing the Shubenacadie Canal Commission. These amendments, Mr. Speaker, were requested by the Commission. They recognize changes in the former Halifax and Dartmouth municipal units. The amendments will also allow for improved Commission representation from Colchester and East Hants municipalities and will update references to the Department of Natural Resources and the Municipal Government Act, Mr. Speaker. And finally, Mr. Speaker, something that's very important, I know all members in this House, and I think to all Nova Scotians, we were pleased to introduce amendments to several acts to allow ministers responsible to provide long service awards to peace officers, firefighters, and emergency management personnel in the province of Nova Scotia. Mr. Speaker, the affected acts include the Emergency Management Act, the Fire Safety Act, and the Police Act. The awards, Mr. Speaker, will recognize a significant contribution to protection of persons and properties that are provided by many men and women throughout the province of Nova Scotia on a daily basis. Mr. Speaker, these amendments will ensure these dedicated men and women are appropriately recognized for their long-standing commitment to this province. Mr. Speaker, I move for second reading of Bill number 136.
Thank you. The Honourable, the Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's my pleasure to rise today to speak on Bill 136. The Minister indicated that there are a number of housekeeping matters, and I recognize that to be the case, but I'd like to comment briefly on a couple of the matters that are here. Obviously, providing for the registration of claims through the small claims court, particularly when there isn't a justice center in a particular county, and allowing that to be filed in an adjacent county is something that makes sense, and I realize that the intent of the Act in that regard is simply to provide for an efficient way to get those claims filed. I think that makes sense. I don't see anything with respect to that particular provision that would give rise to any particular concern. I do note, and I was just kibitzing with my colleague here, and it isn't, small claims court's almost a misnomer nowadays. $25,000 before this small claims court, you get some pretty significant claims going on. And there was a time when the small claims court's whole kind of reason to exist was so that people could go unrepresented before a court and kind of work out their own claims. Well, nowadays, Mr. Speaker, any significant size claim, you go to small claims court on any night and you'll find a room full of lawyers sitting in there now on retainer doing the work, and you know, that's a bit different than was originally believed, I think, to be the case when initially the Act was brought in. I'm not saying that that's a bad thing. They have a simplified procedure. You don't have to go through the same kind of wait times that you would in a larger claim. As far as I know, there's no process for discovery, and you know, unless they've changed that since I came to this chamber. So it does have its advantages in terms of a simplified claim process. So I always thought it was a good mechanism. I thought it sometimes got a little abused by people who you know, essentially were using it to you know, do collections and that sort of thing when oftentimes the people on the other side of the claims didn't have access to the same kind of expertise. And you go into small claims court some nights and there'd be some people in there and they would have, you know, 15 claim files underneath their arms. So they're kind of kind of pumping them through. Anyway, that's the only comment I had with respect to small claims court. With respect to the Shubenacadie Canal Commission, I actually will go so far as to commend the minister for bringing this forward. I know that the Shubenacadie Canal Committee was looking for these changes. I think it's particularly a good thing to understand that I represented for some number of years downtown Dartmouth, and where the Shubenacadie Canal Centre, where the Shubenacadie Canal starts, and right up to the Shubenacadie Canal Centre, and the reality, though, is that the Shubenacadie Canal extends all the way across the province, and through East Hants, through Colchester County, and if we're going to treat this as what I think it should be treated as, which is a historical asset, then certainly those counties should have some representation with respect to the commission. So obviously this was thought out by the commission itself. The recommendations come forward. I'm pleased to see that the minister and the government is acting on this, on these recommendations. The other parts of the Act, Mr. Speaker, has to do with long service medals. Pleased to see that all of these are being recognized, particularly so for the ground search and rescue, and that's not to diminish either the firefighters or the police service. Ground search and rescue, though, you know, for a long time, I think they've been underappreciated. And my brother-in-law, my sister have been active members of the ground search and rescue in Queens County for quite a long time, and I actually remember before there was any kind of medal, doing up kind of awards and going up and presenting pins from the government of Nova Scotia to some of the ground search and rescue folks, just because I really felt that they ought to be recognized for the work that they do. They work under sometimes very, very difficult circumstances and under a great deal of stress. So I'm pleased to see that there's going to be a mechanism for the recognition of the work that they do in this regard. So that's essentially the comments that I had. I don't think there's anything in this Act that raises any kind of real concern. Obviously, the pieces of the Act here that have been included needed to be included, and I'll look forward to this going on to law amendments. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. The Honourable, the Leader of the Liberal Party.
Thank you, Speaker, and it's a pleasure to make a few comments on Bill number 136, an act respecting the administration of justice. And as has been mentioned, certainly the provisions in this act do not raise any alarms as some of the previous Justice Administration Acts we may have seen some years ago, and not under this minister, but in the past, that fortunately that hasn't been the case. But, you know, Mr. Speaker, this is again an opportunity, and I would encourage the minister that when bills like this are being brought in, it's better if we get to see them beforehand, and then we can get any questions that we have answered then, rather than us stand on our feet and ask the minister questions. Not that there's something wrong with that, but it might give us an opportunity to get some of those answers before the bill is tabled, and then we can have those discussions then. And I look at the bill, and for example, under community health boards, it removes the limitation. You know, my question would only be who asked for that, and you know, why did we have limitations in the first place if we're removing them? So those are just questions that again that we could have answered before, and an indication as to why those changes are there. One of those things that I would say to the Minister of Justice, Mr. Speaker, is that having been justice critic for a number of years, and as was pointed out, some of the concerns that were raised by the Leader of the Official Opposition, is that when the minister brought in the change in the amount for the small claims court, we did have a discussion at that point that the minister would be prepared to review the impact of those changes after they were put in, because we raised the concerns before that if you're going to increase the jurisdiction levels, suddenly you may be taking away the whole goal of small claims by making it a court that's easy to access, that people can understand, and more importantly, that you don't necessarily need a lawyer to be able to bring your matter to court. So I'm not sure if the minister can advise us as to whether his staff have been undertaking any sort of review to see the impact of those changes, if they've been talking to any of the officials, the adjudicators that have been hearing the small claims court matters, to see from their opinion what impact has there been on the small claims court since the jurisdiction limits have been increased to $25,000. And as I said earlier, when we talked about that, the minister had committed at that time that he'd be prepared to review what impact those changes might have, and maybe the minister can advise the House as to whether that kind of review has taken place or whether his staff is in contact with the adjudicators in order to determine what impact, if any, that those changes have had. But other than that, Mr. Speaker, some of the changes to the Emergency Measurement Act, the Fire Safety Act, to be able to recognize long service is something that I'm sure all members of this House would give their approval to. And with that, unless there are any surprises that do come out of the law amendment stage, I'm sure that Bill 136 will probably be able to proceed quite quickly. So with that, we'll certainly be giving our support for Bill 136 to move on to second reading and on to law amendments. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. We'll now recognize the Honourable Minister of Justice to close debate on Bill 136.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank both members opposite for their comments and questions and concerns, and I'll endeavour to get the answers to their questions. Absolutely, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to move second reading of Bill number 136.
Thank you. The motion before the House is for second reading on Bill number 136. Is the House ready for the question? Question has been called. All those in favour of the motion, please say aye. Those against? Motion carried.
Bill 136, entitled An Act Respecting the Administration of Justice.
Order that this bill be referred to the Committee on Law Amendments. The Honourable the Deputy Government House Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, that concludes the government's business for the day, and I'd like to pass things over to the House Leader of the Liberal Party.
Thank you. The Honourable the House Leader for the Liberal Party.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the House will sit tomorrow from the hours of 2 p.m. until 6 p.m. Following the daily routine, we'll be calling Bill 143 and Resolution number 1909. Mr. Speaker, I would now move that the House do adjourn until 2 o'clock on the morrow.
Thank you. The motion for adjournment has been called. Motion before the House is for the House to rise and meet again tomorrow at the hour of 2 p.m. All those in favour of the motion, please say aye. All those against, motion carried. The House will sit tomorrow between the hours of 2 p.m. and 6 p.m. We have arrived at the moment of interruption. The adjournment debate has been chosen as announced earlier. Therefore, it be resolved that this government immediately establish a comprehensive buy local program to recognize that government must take a leading role in supporting local producers. The Honourable Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. It's a pleasure to rise this evening on the motion that was submitted by the member for Pictou East. As you know, Mr. Speaker, this has been a growing matter of debate in this province with respect to the buy local program, and I think it's first only fair if we set out some of the background. In fact, what you would know, Mr. Speaker, is that many jurisdictions around the world seek to encourage their citizens to buy from local producers, and this is seen as a way to strengthen local economies and to ensure that local producers are supplying the needs of their community, and in return are getting paid a fair price for the products that they are producing. And that's a fundamental piece of what's going on in agriculture today, that whole notion of who's getting a fair price for what they're producing. And I'll try to get back to that before the expiry of time, but I want to talk more directly about the kind of buy local campaign that we should be undertaking here in the province. Over the last number of years, this has actually been a bit of a political football, if I can use that analogy, Mr. Speaker. In fact, I know that the current government has promised a buy local program on many occasions. They did prior to the election in 1998, the first one in which I was elected. They promised it again in 1999, which of course was the first opportunity that they actually had to do something about it, because that's when they went into government. But unfortunately, Mr. Speaker, time elapsed from 1994 to 2003. No buy local program was put in place. However, that didn't stop them in 2003 to again promising a buy local campaign. I mean, after all, if you haven't fulfilled a promise, then you can make it again. It's still good. So in 2003, the commitment was made again to the people of Nova Scotia. And between 2003 and 2006, again, there was no action on this. So the current government decided in 2006, in June of last year, that they would again make this commitment to the people of Nova Scotia. I think the difference, though, over the years, Mr. Speaker, over the 10 years that this notion has been bandied about, is that people are becoming more and more impatient to see the plan that the government has for actually implementing a buy local campaign. Now, I mentioned that there are many around the world and in other jurisdictions. I know that there is what they call the Red Tractor campaign in the United Kingdom, where if you go into a grocery store, if you see a red tractor on the product, you know immediately that that's a product that has been manufactured in the United Kingdom. And of course, people are more likely to purchase local products because they want to support local farmers, so long as the product is competitively priced. And there's no way around it. I mean, all products have some price sensitivity, but I think that you will find that people are prepared, even though they are price sensitive, are prepared to pay a little more for a local product because they know that the utility involved in providing a reward to the local farmer is far greater when they do that. Here in this province, as I've mentioned, there's been a long period in which this commitment has not been fulfilled, and I have to say that we've set out our own program, which we think is fairly modest in terms of its expense, one that would be able to at least start us down the road toward a more comprehensive buy local program. But before I get into the details of what we have proposed, I want to mention that I was in the Valley last week, as was the minister responsible for environment and labor, as was the member for Kings West. We were all attending a rally that was put on by the Women's Institute of Nova Scotia as part of what they call the Buy Local Challenge. There's two things about that. One part of it is that they financed a survey of consumers that demonstrated the willingness of those consumers to buy local products if they are able to identify them. And there was a fairly uniform opinion on this from no matter where these consumers happen to be from. And I noted that in particular under the study that was done by the Women's Institute, that 20% of the respondents in that survey were actually urban consumers. And urban consumers were saying that we would buy from Nova Scotia producers if we could identify it properly on the shelf. So it's one of these issues where urban consumers want to purchase the product from rural producers just as much as rural producers want the urban consumers to do so. So there's a kind of unanimity of opinion in this regard that to me simply says that the time is right for the government to move on some kind of a substantive program. We think that that program ought to have three pieces. First of all, there ought to be some money set aside. We've suggested something in the order of $200,000, which would allow the provincial government to leverage with some of the retailers some advertising to if you use the money correctly, the retailers would get the benefit of the advertising showing that they're selling local products, and the local producers would get the benefit of having that advertisement go out so that consumers would then know where they could go to buy local products. The second part is really an identification program. We suspect that probably not more than $50,000 to manufacture an appropriate logo. I have suggested that we actually use the Nova Scotia flag. We could call it the Blue and White campaign. But I mean, frankly, any kind of recognizable logo that demonstrates something as local would be workable. It's not expensive. You would have to get the retailers involved in the process because they would have to agree to ensure that these stickers made it on to the product. The third part of that is some leadership on behalf of the government of Nova Scotia, and they should be ensuring that right across the broad public sector, that wherever there are purchases being made, that fundamentally they should be committed to buying Nova Scotia products. And I told this very brief story. I do want to mention two things, and I realize I'm running out of time already. One was that when we were at this rally in the Valley that was sponsored by the Women's Institute of Nova Scotia, the member for Kings North indicated that the NDP was following along in the footsteps of the Women's Institute of Nova Scotia. And I observed then and will observe now that if that is the case, we're very happy to be in that company because we think they do just marvelous work on this issue and as they have on many other issues in the past. The second thing that I just wanted to note is that these buy local campaigns demonstrate a matter of leadership on behalf of the government. Recently, I was in to see the Minister of Finance. He was gracious enough to give me a bottle of water. I told the story there, and I turned it over. The bottle of water was actually from Ontario, and that's not to diminish. I mean, that's the minister was being gracious in his offer, but it says to people that on all of these purchasing decisions, you should be cognizant of what you're buying and where it's coming from, because that bottle of water has an environmental footprint. I mean, we don't have any problem with water in this province. You could turn on the tap and get the product, the Halifax Water Commission. But if you're going to buy bottled water, then you certainly should buy water that's from Nova Scotia and bottled here. The trucking of water great distances and the fuel that's used to do that obviously has an environmental footprint. So those are just some of the comments I want to make tonight. I'm very thankful for the member for Pictou East for bringing this forward. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. The Honourable the Minister of Environment and Labour.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank the member who put this forward for a very, very important topic, and one, of course, that's of great interest to me as an MLA in the beautiful Annapolis Valley, the breadbasket of Nova Scotia, the third most productive agricultural area in the country of Canada, and I think the most beautiful. The Buy Local organization that was referenced by the Leader of the Opposition, that he was at, that Scott Bryson was at, and that the member for Kings West was at, was organized by Brenda Parker, and I want to publicly go on the record for thanking Brenda for her good work. When she came to me a few weeks ago, more than that now, and she said, "What can I do, Mark? What should we do?" And I said, let's do something together on buying local. And maybe we can expand from that and have some discussion. It turned out in the end that Brenda did all the work, and all I did was help pay for the use of the room at the Port Williams Community Centre, which is my hometown. And she did a fantastic job. I mean, there were about 400 people there. She had representatives from the retail sector, from various commodity groups, speaking about the challenges, the opportunities, and I think instilling hope within the various people that were there, that we do have power as consumers to make changes. I spoke at that meeting, and the member of the opposition will probably forgive me for reiterating some of what I said at the meeting, which follows along in rather shocks me how closely we agree on this. Something must be happening to me that we agree so closely on this, or maybe something's happening to him that he agrees so closely with me. Anyway, the important thing, as he mentioned, is to build popular support, and I think the honourable member is right in that there seems to be a growing desire, a growing recognition of the importance of buying local. I was referencing at that meeting the cover of Time magazine that talked about how really buying local not only is good for the local economy, but it's also healthy, and it's better food, and there's more control over it. And that if you really wanted to eat healthy food, you should buy local. And I've seen that referenced in various places, and I think there's this growing sort of awareness and growing desire to buy local. The member opposite referenced that in the survey that the Women's Institute conducted, and they'll be doing some follow-up study on that, that 20% of the people who responded to the survey were from Metro, and that they too wanted to buy local. And I wanted to take the opportunity to put in a plug for the Halifax Farmers Market, Mr. Speaker, because it's a fantastic institution. They're looking at building a new building or taking over part of Pier 21 and an environmentally friendly building, expanding. I hope that they'll have the support of all parties in this House. I know they will. I have farmers in my riding, a couple that I married when I was doing an honest job before I entered politics. I'm still honest job. Yes, I'll take that back, Mr. Speaker. When I did a different job helping people, and I'm still helping people in a different capacity. But anyway, when I married this couple, and I found out since then that they make their whole income off of, during the summer, bringing their produce into the farmers market. And because people at the farmers market want to buy local, are willing to pay a bit extra, cherish that relationship, it becomes more of a community that they're able, Mr. Speaker, to maintain a farm in the valley, supporting themselves and various workers due to the Halifax Farmers Market. And so I want to commend the Halifax Farmers Market and the consumers here in the city of HRM who support that institution. The important thing about buying local, we have to do a few things, which I think the Speaker opposite already referenced. Government needs to show leadership, Mr. Speaker, in terms of its own activities. And I confess that in '99, when we announced this program, I was hoping for more results then, and as the member for that area, I've been asking about this program on a consistent basis. Finally, I'm delighted that some things are starting to happen. We have a dedicated market specialist, development specialist in the Department of Agriculture, whose prime focus is encouraging the use of local products at our various institutions across the province. And as the acting Minister of Agriculture referenced in question period, I believe, that this person has had great success. Since 2005, one of the largest institutional buying groups have grown their purchase of local products from 5,700 kilograms to 42,000 kilograms, Mr. Speaker, and 63% of what this group buys now is maritime food. 50% of Nova Scotia's healthcare facilities, and he's the minister not only acting in agriculture, but he's the minister of health, and 50% are now serving beef that comes from our region. Two local companies, Mr. Speaker, ACA and Larson's, have dominated the poultry and pork supplies to our healthcare facilities. And the majority of beef purchases in the Metro hospitals come from Armstrong Food Services. So the health department, there's been some great success, and that may well be attributable to the minister who came from being Minister of Agriculture and Fisheries and who has a passion, I know, for supporting local fish production and catching and processing, and also agriculture. And he's obviously had a good influence on the Department of Health. They've also been working with the school boards. They've had trade shows in 3 of the school board areas, one in my own area, encouraging the school boards and the schools to buy local as well. And then there have been other things that have happened. We've improved tender specifications to make sure that local producers are able to bid. We've broken down the tender list to allow for local agricultural and food businesses. For example, Mr. Speaker, instead of bidding for meat as a whole, they'll bid for pork and lamb, which the Speaker opposite would be interested in, which allows our local industries to bid and to bid successfully on these tenders that come out. And we're creating a database that connects Nova Scotia suppliers and producers interested in supplying Nova Scotia institutions, putting Nova Scotia first. Are we where we'd like to be? No, I'd like to go further, Mr. Speaker. I would be happy if the vast majority of food bought by our local institutions, by our health boards, community boards was local, but we are making substantive progress since 2005. The second thing we need to do is empower consumers, and we need a labeling system. We used to have the Atlantic Plus system, if you remember the little green sticker. We need a labeling system, and Mr. Speaker, I'd asked for a photocopy to come back because I'd spoken some time ago on buying local, and this triggered a local seed food producer, I believe in the member from Digby Annapolis's riding, to send me a logo which he developed, which he said he'd be happy to share free of charge with anybody. And it's quite an intriguing logo. I'll table it. He has the Canadian maple leaf and the Nova Scotia flag, and then product of Canada produced in Nova Scotia. So I'll table it, and he's quite willing, if we want to use that. So the label needs to be decided. We need to decide exactly the scope of local. The Women's Institute, Mr. Speaker, talked about how most Nova Scotians identify local with the province of Nova Scotia. The Canadian Health Guide talks about 50 kilometers from where the health where the food was grown. Others talk about the Atlantic provinces being the local market that we're interested in. But we do definitely need a labeling program. I have so many people who say to me, Mark, I want to buy local, I want to support our local farmers, but when I go into the grocery store, I'm not sure if the product is local or not. So we need a labeling system. We need government to take leadership in its own institutions. And then thirdly, we need value added. We need to make sure that extra money gets back to the farm gate. Because, Mr. Speaker, all our pork is locally sold, but the price is set outside of the Maritimes, outside of Nova Scotia, and the farmers can't compete on that price. So we need that third component as well, and I wish I had more time to elaborate on that, because I think that's a very important component that we need to talk about. But I want to thank the Speaker opposite for speaking on this, and the party opposite for bringing this important issue forward.
Thank you. The honourable member for Kings West.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And certainly I want to start out by saying that this was a very, very relevant and key topic, I think, for our first late debate in the spring session. In fact, there are a few topics, I think, more on the minds of Nova Scotians now, because what we're seeing happening is really that all Nova Scotians want to engage in being part of the solution here. There is no question that whoever we talk to today across the province, and especially those in the farm community, an agricultural crisis is part of the landscape here in our province. And, there's even weakness in the managed commodity sectors. And when that shows up, I think, some of the underpinnings of this very, very important sector are starting to be attacked. And there's no question that in the unmanaged sector, there are many challenges that they are currently experiencing. Recent Stats Canada report shows that farmers across the country, and especially those in the unmanaged sectors, highlighted by hog and cattle producers, are the lowest on net income, and in fact their net incomes have been going down since the 2001 census. So if they're not making money, it's difficult for them to remain in the business. It was interesting that when they had a major rally in the valley at Port Williams in the Minister of Environment and Labor's riding, that right on the doorstep of where we were located in the fire hall, there is a considerable acreage that is now under review as to whether or not it will be taken out of agricultural use and go into housing development. And if we didn't have the crisis in agriculture, we wouldn't have the crisis in loss of land. I mean, if agriculture is vibrant, then we're not going to lose agricultural land. So we're at a real challenge now to hopefully be able to expand some of our production through local campaigns. In fact, just in the past 2 weeks, I attended, along with my colleague from Annapolis, a rally put on in Bridgetown by 2 high school students who wanted to show that they wanted to talk about the crisis in agriculture, but they also wanted to ask a number of different speakers what are some of the solutions. So I feel now that even those that have been hurt the most, and if you talk to our cattle producers, and especially our hog producers, as the member from Hants East wrote in his article, hog producers in Nova Scotia are in free fall. Essentially, government has said we're no longer interested in a hog industry, certainly in the traditional sense of the industry. So we will lose it as a major commodity in this province. There will be emanations, there will be some parts of it that will continue to exist. But the one thing for certain now, and that's really part of what the spirit of Nova Scotia is all about, and especially in rural Nova Scotia, is that they don't want to collapse. They want to fight back. And I think, this is really a nonpartisan issue, but certainly I respect my colleagues opposite in the official opposition who are urging government, and we as a party as well, speaking for our party here, that we want to see a buy local campaign get off the ground in the year 2007. It was an election promise, and I think the Nova Scotians are ready to embrace this. One of the first things that I think really needs to be done, and there was some reference to this, and that is consult with farmers to develop a comprehensive long-term strategy for sustainable agriculture growth. Those are the people that can tell us. And I would not be adverse to seeing a committee put in place of the presidents and the heads of the unmanaged sector to be an advisory group to the minister. When I talk to some of these people, these are long-time participants, long-time farmers in our community who have the business acumen, who have the knowledge to help the minister and the Department of Agriculture to look around the corner, to be able to pick off some of the things that can be done to avert some of the decline that we have experienced. And I think that would be a good thing, a real consultation with farmers in a very broad spectrum, and then pick somebody. It doesn't necessarily perhaps even have to be the head of these associations who would become an advisory group to the minister. Because I know when they were here, when the unmanaged sector spoke during the hog rally here in January, I mean, to hear those people, those speakers with the expertise they have, that's exactly where we have to go. We don't need to go to the bureaucrats to get the answers. Go to the front line people who can help government plan for this emerging program, which I think absolutely has to take place. And so I think part of the solution, it's not going to be the full one, but I think the chance to help farmers and to have Nova Scotians become participants in the correction process is full-scale buy local campaign. And there's no question that these have had success in other jurisdictions. And one of the ones that I became familiar with 3 years ago at the Eastern Governors Council summer meetings was the one in Massachusetts. And I even like their logo. And they've called their program Be a Local Hero, Buy Locally Grown. And they started it in '99, and I would just like to read into the record for all of the House perhaps to take a look at what happened in Western Massachusetts as a result of this program. And the quote here says, "I see local hero everywhere. Nearly 80% of consumers are aware of the Local Hero campaign. 78% can recall the major theme and slogan without being prompted by pollsters. 86% of the residents of Western Massachusetts are favorable toward the advertisements and believe they make a convincing case for buying locally grown food. More than 80% of those polled agree that it is important to continue the message so that residents are kept aware of the benefits of buying locally grown food. 65% say they are buying more local food as a result of the Local Hero campaign. And we have not had that kind of effort, obviously. We've talked about, buying local, but we now need to get a leader in place to run a campaign with a team that will educate Nova Scotians about the value of having fresh, locally traceable grown food. But here's the real thing that really hits me coming from Kings County, Kings West, which is really, we might as well acknowledge, the heart of agriculture in Nova Scotia. In the census of 2001, 28% of people were directly or indirectly affected by agriculture. It has slipped to 25%, and I can assure you with the closing of Kennard and what may happen at Larson's, we are certainly fearful of the way it's going. But the survey also indicated that 65% of respondents increased their production. Farmers increased their production. 55% increased the price of goods they sell. 42% started or increased farm stand sales. 41% started or increased sales to restaurants or retailers. And again, whether we pick something that government comes up with, the official opposition comes up with, or whatever in terms of a logo and labeling, it just needs to be done. We can call it the Blue Nose brand, we can call it the blue and white brand, whatever it is, we've got to get it out there and get it identified, because there's still a major problem. Go into our big chain stores and we cannot tell what is grown in Nova Scotia. We don't even give the farmer a fair chance, if you wish. So I think something is about to emerge, and I thank Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. I would like to thank all the honourable members for having taken part in tonight's late debate. The motion for adjournment has been made. We stand adjourned until 2 p.m. tomorrow afternoon.